Fine Russian cuisine. You know that new kind of burger? The one made from cells taken from the skin of cows? Yeah, it seems like science teams and research labs finally created a way of making food from basically nothing. And you think that would be a great thing, but I'm not so sure. This isn't the first time a project like this has sprung up. You're probably thinking I'm screwing with you now, but I'm serious. It's happened before. You've probably never heard of this, and like all things, there's a reason for this never being told. A rather disturbing reason. Way back into the Second World War, the Russian government realized they were struggling to feed their people. Children were sick, people were diseased and malnourished. Many people even tried to protest, but as history tells, they were quickly silenced. Of course, the government needed a solution that didn't involve murdering all that spoke out, and fast. An unhappy populace leads to riots, violence, and destruction after all. And so they commissioned a small team of scientists to create something. No real idea was given, so the science team was given free rein to do whatever they chose. Codename Fine Russian Cuisine. In the end, they came up with a monstrous idea. You know how cancer cells multiply and multiply when they're in the body? Well, the Russian scientist team thought they could use this sort of growth, found in tumors, and other such awful disease and infection, as meat products. Now, if tumor burgers sound bad enough, it gets far worse from here. They created a sort of serum, made from tumors sprung up on animals, like bubbles on a boiling pot of water. They needed something that they could grow the cells on. Animals were out of the question, as they were needed to produce more and more food. So the first thing they asked the hires up is not a lab, or a grant or something like that. They asked for permission to use prisoners of war as freaking guinea pigs. So they tried it out. They get results, and then, in the blink of an eye, only a few weeks into development, something catastrophic breaks the whole thing down. Now you're probably wondering, how the hell do I know this grotesque shit? But I'll tell you. I've been to the labs. When I learned from an anonymous source that this insanity was going on, I just had to find out where they did it. And sure enough, after months of searching around the Russian wilderness, I finally get a lead on this Russian town called Lysychansk. I talked around about Russian cuisine, and on the second guy, I get a genuine response. It wasn't a good one, I bet. The guy spat at my feet and told me to fuck off and die. But this was an indication that the labs were known around the town. I asked around, and I either got weird looks, shrugs, or scowls, until I met one guy. Vasily. He looked like he was in his late 80s. Had a face like it had been kicked by the hind legs of a horse. Had a sort of limp to go with it. But the man was a goldmine when it came to the project. He gave me the exact location, the way to get in, and even how long it would take to get there. And I was surprised, to say the least. Most people in the town didn't even know, let alone want to talk about it. I was a little suspicious. I asked him why he was giving me all this information, and he simply responds, "There's something you must see," in a floaty Russian accent. "What is it?" I replied tentatively, a little nervous now, with this cryptic message making me rather anxious. "You'll see." And with that, he hobbled off, and I was left with the knowledge that there was something important, and possibly horrifying, I needed to see up in that lab. Now, at this point, I had a choice. I either stay far the hell away from whatever the hell Vasily was speaking about, or I go and feed, no pun intended, my curiosity. Of course, curiosity won that round. So I gathered up some supplies, a flashlight, some water, a map of the wilderness, stuff like that, and a rucksack, and drove off. It took about a day to reach the decrepit old tunnels. It was right up a rather long, steep climb up a rather intimidating mountain, like a spear among the thumbtacks. The tunnel jutted out of the mountainside like a knife through butter. It was untouched. The little guard box at the side of it still had a gun and ammunition in it, with a little book opened at the side. I pressed a small button to open the large gate leading inside. It groaned and yawned open, the dust barely hanging on as the gate shuddered to life. I walked inside, and took the flashlight out of my bag. Turning it on, lit up a long, dusty hallway, with large metal doors at the back of it. far less anxious than I was earlier, thinking that there probably wasn't anything living in here for years. No sign of life. Not even algae growing on the walls or plants in the cracks. Nothing. I creaked open the door and headed deeper into the heart of the facility. A few new paths sprung up in front of me. The infirmary, canteen, labs, sleeping quarters, and holding cells. I decided to check out the sleeping quarters first. Inside, there was another hallway filled with doors to different rooms. Workers' quarters, 1 to 10, science quarters, 1 to 5, and the warden's quarters. I checked a few of the workers' quarters, nothing but dusty beds and empty drawers. The scientist wards proved some more interesting results. 1 to 2 were empty, but 3 had a little tape player and 7 different tapes. I took them and started listening to them as I walked along the winding passage. The speaker had a very familiar voice. I couldn't put my finger on what, but I knew I'd heard the voice before. The throatiness, the depth and pitch all seemed eerily familiar. Day 1 of Project Russian Cuisine. A test subject named Norman was injected with the serum to produce cancerous cells. Slight discomfort, but no tumors grown. I am still utterly ashamed by my colleague's idea to eat tumors. But at this time, it's better than any other idea we've come up with. It's either that or we starve. Autumn tells me that the workers don't know what they're working towards, probably for the best. After checking the other quarters, I finally headed into the warden's room. It looked like all the others, dusty bed, open drawers, but there were 2 things that caught my eye. One was a little keycard with a label saying cells attached to it. The other was a note, scrawled in Russian. Knowing a little Russian myself, I attempted to translate it. What I found made me nervous, to say the least. If you are reading this, run. This building has a fucking curse. You can't even hope to comprehend. And the thing I and the other men did will forever haunt these halls. And no priest will ever cleanse this place. Growths. Those satanic growths. The end of the passage in particular made every synapse in my being simultaneously scream in one voice, run. But my curiosity again caught hold of me like a choke chain. I rationalized again this place was very, very abandoned. But at the same time, there was something very off about it. I put in another tape and the familiar voice played. Day 2. Growths have finally sprouted on the liver and intestine. We have to give a high dose of morphine to Norman. As his screaming was yelling the other scientists working. Extracting the tumors was easy enough, but we are struggling to think of ways of testing the potential products. Norman is now in holding, and presumably will die in the next few weeks. We will discuss with the chefs and talk about the mystery meat. I got out of the quarters and headed to the canteen. The empty rows upon rows of dining tables and benches spanned the huge halls. Empty plates, dirty knives and forks, everything was untouched by time. Which was when I noticed the eerie hum coming from the kitchen. I wondered, was electricity being supplied to this place? If so, why? What reason would the Russians have to supply this place with electricity? I headed into the kitchen and found the hum was coming from the refrigerator. I shuddered to think what sick thing lurked behind the metal door, but I wanted to know now. I was already knee-deep into it. I would be stupid to quit now. I placed my shaking hand on the cold handle, my heart pumping quicker and quicker. My anxiety levels through the roof, and I flung the door open. Flesh. Rows upon rows of meaty, gross flesh. I nearly flew up, just barely reaching my mouth and covering it. The smell was unthinkable. Like someone cut open a swine and left it inside to rot for a while. I immediately shut the door and tried to catch my breath in the musky darkness. I decided to listen to another tape to try and calm my nerves, but it only made things worse. Day 3. We fed the meat to a couple of men. They seemed to enjoy the burgers, though they did not notice the so-called odd taste. Apparently like lamb. Maybe even a bit of liver. We decided to feed more people the meat, though I, like many others in the project, are still skeptical of the health aspects from eating this ghastly concoction. I was still hyperventilating after seeing the products of the men's experiments, but I pressed on into the labs. This is when things got even more gut-wrenching, gruesome. There was crusted dark blood on the little lab tables. More of the gross meat carelessly splayed, hacksaws, everything you might imagine from some kind of stereotypical horror flick. Again, the smell was unbearable. The sight made me want to spew, but the room saved the worst for last at the back. A little door with testing on a little sign attached to it. A gut feeling told me that this was going to be bad. I played the tape. Day 4. Our new subject tried to break free. A couple of days of growing had completely warped his mind and physical appearance, which led him to try and attack some of the workers and myself. Bastard bit me. He nearly broke out. So in the end we had to put him down. Describing in words what he looked like by the end of the endeavor would be like trying to describe an orphanage catching fire. So I will spare the details. One thing is for sure. I don't want to work here anymore. The thing we've created needs to be stopped. But here I am trapped. I need help. So I was back at that moment. My heart started racing. My whole body was shaking in terror. I knew this was going to be bad. I knew whatever was waiting on the other side of that door would be even worse than the cafeteria. I swung the door open, expecting the worst. And what I got was a small room, a glass window, and another room, holding a chair. Nothing serious. I looked inside a little more and suddenly saw a black mass sitting on the top of the chair. Immediately I crouched down, fear spreading through my body. Shit. Something was in here. The mass wasn't moving, so I thought whatever it was either dead or asleep. I wanted to see what it was. I needed to know. You see, these cryptic messages started to make sense, as my curiosity had been fueling my decisions every step of my exploration. I needed to see this, as I started to feel like I was being guided by some otherworldly force, or at least that's how I rationalized it. Looking back, I must have been insane not to run away after I opened the fridge, but who knows. I crept up quietly to check if it was breathing, and sure enough, not a sound. I relaxed a little and played another tape, the scientist now sounding a lot less healthy than the tape before. Stopping to cough mid-sentence, it sounded like he had gotten ill with something. I'm not sure though. Day 5. I've been infected. The thing spreads after you touch them. I can't believe I didn't realize. The workers that have eaten the meat have all been ill with God knows what. It finally makes sense now. What's wrong with them? I have a tumor growing out of my face. I think I'm going blind in one eye. The rest of my colleagues are holding me in my cell before they bring the doctors in to remove it. I try to tell them we need to stop, and if we continue feeding the workers the meat, we shall all have dire consequences. But of course they won't listen. Poor bastards. More afraid of their own government chasing them and creating these abominations. It was then that I finally put a light on the mass sitting in the chair. Something that looked human, but at the same time was something ungodly and unjust. Scars littered its face, which itself had bulges the size of tennis balls coming out of various areas. Its gums were bare, as its lips seemed to have been removed, showing large broken teeth. The body was almost as bad, a skinny, withered figure, with only one large pulsating arm tied to the chair. God, tumors must have been growing from every muscle in its body. I looked at its eyes, black, dissented out of proportion like some kind of messed up Picasso painting, and the eyes looked back. I jumped back and dropped my flashlight, screaming. The thing was alive, and it was looking right at me. It breathed in heavy, throaty mix of a splutter and a cough, like a man being choked. It tried to struggle free, struggling and screaming in a disgusting guttural screech, its mouth wide open, and teeth bared at me. I ran to the door, but the thing broke free. It jumped on me, its one arm pinning me down as it tried to gnaw its knife-like teeth into me. I barely managed to grab my flashlight and hit the monstrosity on the head as hard as I could, and managed to get it off me. I didn't stop hitting until its face was merely a red smear on the floor, with my hands dripping with a mixture of blood, sweat, bile, and tears. I sat down, almost completely depleted, my mind still racing and my heart still pounding. I tried to relax and decided to put the second to last tape in the meantime. Day 14. I've been in the hospital for many days. My face still feels numb from the surgery, and things are worse off than ever. The tumors have been spreading amongst the workers. More and more people have been put into the cell blocks as we eat our own ungodly creation. I try to tell my colleagues that we need to run now, before we all turn into one of those damn things, but they don't listen. So I ended it. I ran out of the facility, and made sure that the door leading to the outside was closed for good. If the meat managed to make it out of the country, God knows what would happen. If anyone finds these tapes, get out now, before you catch it. I was confused. There were 7 tapes, yet 6 seemed to conclude everything. Why was there another? Confused, I played the final tape. The voice was different, but still the same throaty speech. If you are listening to this, you're probably wondering about a few things. Why is this place being supplied with electricity? What are you looking for? What happened to the rest of the crew? It seems improbable, but the answer to all these questions lies behind the cell block door. I warn you, once you see it, run. Run out of the complex and shut the gate. You can't let even one of these disease mongers to escape into the world. Good luck. After I had fully recovered the assault, I headed for the final part of the complex, cells. As I walked along the hallway, anxiety and dread building up tenfold every single step I took towards the door at the back. This was what I needed to see. This is what I had worked up to, enduring horror after horror in this god-forsaken complex. I stood in front of the steel door, and through the door I could hear noises, growls, choking, spluttering. I could guess a few tumor farms were on the other side. Nothing I couldn't handle after dealing with the first. Throwing caution to the wind, I took out the keycard and slid it through the locking mechanism and opened the door. Bodies all huddled together, packed in the room in its entirety, all deformed, all with pulsating, overgrown limbs, rocky teeth, red-blooded gums, and dead black eyes, all looking at me. I ran, dropped everything, and ran as fast as possible to the light of the other end. A horde of the abominations hot on my trail, screaming and gnawing, biting and swiping at everything they could. If I stopped for even a second, I would be ripped apart. Sweat was practically pouring out of me as I reached the end, and quickly pressed the button to shut the gate. They were still running. The gate wasn't shutting fast enough. Oh God, every one of them was going to get out. As the gate slammed shut, I could hear the screeches and scratches against the metal gate. I kept running to the car, too terrified to even think about slowing down. The only thing in my mind being to get far the fuck away from there. I don't know what happened after that. I must have blacked out. When I came to, I was in my car, bloated and beaten. The hotel owner gave me a hell of a funny look when I came back to wash the blood and bile all over me. I've not seen Vasily since the first time I saw him, and I'm writing this at the hotel. My head hurts. Oh God, my head hurts. I think I've been infected. Gross bumps have appeared all over my hands. My head feels heavy. I feel weak. I'm probably going to have to off myself to make sure the disease doesn't spread. But at least my story was told. God help anyone who finds this. Credit to Gentleman Walrus.